certainly.
I saw something else that had your name over it, involving apparently CIA blackmail of some of our own top politicians, and I was wondering if we could maybe get into that.
Certainly. Well, I mean, blackmail certainly works in many cases. I specifically was mentioning what the CIA had on three Republican senators, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Marco Rubio. And all three of these senators had initially indicated they were not going to support Rex Tillerson, the former ExxonMobil chief, to be Secretary of State. All of a sudden, one after another, collapsing dominoes. First, it was McCain said, "I think I can support Tillerson," even though he criticized Tillerson. He said, "I can't support anyone who took an award from Vladimir Putin." And then the next, it was Lindsey Graham falls in line, says, "I'm not happy, but I'll support Tillerson." And lastly, Marco Rubio, who indicated he was not going to vote to confirm Tillerson, said he was going to. And what the dirt is, and of course Trump has his dirt as well on McCain. McCain has a very, very sordid background.
Yeah, we're going to have to take a break for commercials. Hold that thought. When we come on back, I want to hear all about McCain's sordid background. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Stay tuned. Aloha, America. Pardon me. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Wayne Madsen. We've been talking about his book about CIA front companies. And now we're stepping on over to his recent story about how the CIA is blackmailing some of our top officials. And if you go up high enough, everybody has dirt on them. And you were going to give us the sordid background of John McCain.
Yeah, I guess I should preface this. Back in 2000, I actually was working as a volunteer for the McCain presidential campaign because I thought that George W. Bush was, 100 times worse than McCain. And of course, back then, McCain was really considered the maverick, moderate Republican. But I got to know a lot of people close to John McCain, and including members of his family. So, but when he ran again in 2008, he had really changed his spots. So I started talking to a lot of critics of John McCain, people that had known him over the years, including crewmen on the USS Forrestal. This was a U.S. aircraft carrier that was in the Gulf of Tonkin during the Vietnam War. 1967, it suffered the worst fire in the history of the United States Navy. Scores of sailors were killed, and many more were injured, some permanently. When one of the guys on the flight deck, who was in his jet, his nickname was Johnny Wet Start, and this was John McCain.
Yeah.
And Johnny Wet Start, he got that name because back then, as a form of hazing, and this is very dangerous to do on a flight deck with fuel and bombs and missiles. He did what was called a wet start. It's very similar to if you shake a lighter and then you light it, you get like a big expulsion of a flame. And he did the same thing, except when he did it, he cooked off a air-to-air missile that was on one of the planes behind him. It fired off and caused this terrible conflagration. Now, because I talked to crewmen on the Forrestal, they knew that, McCain, when you had severely injured burn victims, McCain was the first one airlifted off by helicopter to the nearby USS Oriskany because there were members of the crew that knew what he did and wanted to kill him. These are their words, not mine.
And he was the admiral's son.
And he's the admiral's, and grandfather was an admiral. And to make a long story short, people say, "Oh, what the Navy Board of Inquiry shows is plane had its engines parked out over the over the side of the carrier." Well, his dad was able to basically fix that a board of inquiry report to make his son come out looking like a rose. And it wasn't long after that that McCain got shot down over North Vietnam. And here's where we pick up another interesting story. And this came out of a Russian Moscow Post back in 2008 when he was running for president. A KGB officer remembered seeing McCain in the city of Voronezh in southern Russia, near Ukraine. It was then the USSR, and his nickname was called Jack Mouse. And they quoted the commandant of the Hanoi Hilton that said, "Yeah, McCain was here for a while. The Soviets came and took him to interrogate him in the Soviet Union, and he wasn't returned until 1972, and the following year, and that was in preparation for the release of the POWs after the Paris Accords." So we've got McCain pinpointed in Voronezh, where he received very good medical treatment for his injuries from Soviet doctors, and the KGB. He was such a willing. Oh, he was also known by several of his colleagues in the Hanoi Hilton. They called him Songbird McCain because he was telling the North Vietnamese everything they wanted to know. And one person I talked to who was there said he gave 6 months worth of Navy operational flight plans for the bombing missions over North Vietnamese, which is much more than name, rank, and serial number.
Yeah, it definitely is. All right, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back in 4 minutes with Wayne Madsen. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Wayne Madsen. We're talking about some of the dirt on America's top politicians, and I use the term top very loosely. We're talking about John McCain, whose history is not what you have been told it is by the corporate media. We were getting into his nickname in the Hanoi Hilton, Songbird, and I'm sure you're aware, Wayne, that finally one of these tapes that he did make, propaganda tapes from North Vietnam, finally surfaced. Supposedly it was misfiled, but it's been discovered, and it's out there on YouTube. The only reason John McCain was not tried for treason was Richard Nixon issued a blanket pardon to all the returning POWs.
Yes, and so, you know, we know that he spent time, and the thing is, when he was in the Soviet Union, they were obviously trying to program him to be a future agent in the United States, knowing his connections with his father, and I think the reason he has got this real attitude about Russia, I mean, it's a phobia. It's almost like a psychological problem for him, is that he's probably, you know, it's the Manchurian Candidate effect, but, you know, it messed up in his case.
Yes.
And he's got some severe mental issues. Now, of course, we should remember that he was also one of the Keating Five.
Yes.
Senate Ethics Committee really treated those people with kid gloves. McCain was apparently more involved in taking money from Charles Keating's and his SNL than any of the other members of the Keating Five, but he was allowed to skate on that, you know, because he uses this war hero record as a crutch.
Yes. When
in fact that shouldn't mean anything. Look, so make a long story short, all this information is available to people, especially now in the Trump administration. So, you know, it's funny how he always, you know, he'll put up resistance, but when he's faced with the facts, it's like one of the crewmen of the Forrestal told me when he met him in South Carolina right before the primary that year. He mentioned that he was on the Forrestal with McCain, and he said McCain turned as white as a sheet and just wanted to get away from this fellow.
Yeah.
Was just petrified. As far as